Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says the VA is opening a new clinic at Joint Base Langley-Eustis. Rural land deals in Hampton Roads have ignited pushback against development in the past year. There was more farmland up for auction in Suffolk. Ryan Murphy takes us there.
When I first moved here, we had one car per stoplight. Now we got 10, so we don't want to see 50.
And WHRO's Barry Graham catches up with climate scientist David Goodrich as he bikes the eastern shoreline to promote the fight against climate change. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Virginia Democrats hit back at Governor Glenn Youngkin over his last-minute veto of bills protecting access to birth control. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reported the story.
Newport News delegate Sia Price sponsored the bill that would have prevented state or local governments from restricting access to contraceptives. She denounced Youngkin's veto, saying it's catering to the far-right wing of the Republican Party.
As the extremists continue to focus on controlling people's bodies and poking around in folks' bedrooms, what they fail to understand is the real-life impacts of their actions.
Price says she, for instance, wouldn't be able to work if she didn't have contraceptives to treat her ovarian cysts. The Democrats are using the veto as a rallying cry for the presidential and congressional elections, saying reproductive rights are on the ballot again this year. Abortion access is no longer federally protected. Virginia has become a destination for people seeking abortions in the South, as other states have implemented restrictions. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Colonial Williamsburg archaeologists discovered what they believe to be the site of a Revolutionary War barracks. It's the first chance to study buildings made specifically to house Continental soldiers in Williamsburg. The story from WHRO's Nick McNamara.
The dig began to ensure construction of the city's planned indoor sports facility did not disturb any historic artifacts. The plans for that facility have since moved. Excavation unveiled what appears to be multiple housing structures, as well as military artifacts and personal effects from both officers and enlisted men. Executive Director of Archaeology Jack Gary says further excavation work is on hold until after the sports facility construction wraps.
There will be thousands of kids and families coming through this facility, and we'll be able to be doing our work right there and interact with them. So it's an opportunity for us, too, to not just do this work kind of behind the scenes.
Gary says only 30% of the site has been excavated to date. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
The Veterans Administration is opening a new clinic inside Joint Base Langley-Eustis to handle the growing number of veteran clients in Hampton Roads. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
The new clinic is part of an effort to share military facilities with the VA. Hampton Roads has one of the fastest-growing veteran populations in the country. The system is looking for ways to expand quickly, says Dr. Takisa Simmons, director of the Hampton VA.
And when we walked the space, we found out that this would be prime to be able to serve our veterans. And so the collaboration and the work started from there. That was a little over a year ago.
Langley has space available, so the cost of the VA is minimal. The new VA clinic will serve as many as 10,000 veteran patients, providing primary care and outpatient services. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Suffolk's City Council voted to transfer 71 acres of land to the Nansemond Indian Nation. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports the decision was a long time coming.
The property along the Nansemond River is called Matnock Town. Back in 2013, the city gave the land to the tribe, but required them to build a reenactment village as a tourist attraction. That didn't happen, and there were years of back and forth on what to do next. Assistant Chief Dave Henneman with the Nansemond Nation says it took patience and perseverance to get to this week's decision.
It's never too late to do the right thing, and that's what happened last night at Suffolk City Council.
As part of the agreement, the tribe will provide some public access, including walking trails and a kayak launch. They are already working to restore the land, which was wrecked by past mining operations. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Virginia Democrats were on hand to open campaign offices for President Joe Biden in Hampton and Virginia Beach last weekend. As WHRO's Michelle Hankerson reports, they used the opportunity to remind supporters about other elections as well.
At the Virginia Beach office, Norfolk area State Senator Angela Williams-Graves reminded supporters there are local races on the ballot in November, too.
Do not forget that we have Democrats, good, strong Democrats, all the way down the ballot. So when you start at the top, make sure that you don't stop until you get to the end.
Former Democratic Governor Ralph Northam was also there to plug the successes of his time in office, like Virginia being rated the best in the country for business and working on automatic rights restoration.
It's real important to me and my wife that we continue to work on the progress that we did, and so I'll be as involved as people want me to moving forward.
Northam says he wants to be involved in the 2024 election cycle to protect reproductive rights and prepare Virginia for statewide elections in 2025. Those elections include electing a new governor. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
A former government contractor will soon be sentenced for masterminding one of U.S. history's biggest military corruption scandals. Over 2 decades, Leonard Glenn Francis bribed more than 30 Navy officials as part of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Andrew Dyer reports for the American Homefront Project.
Leonard Glenn Francis was better known as Fat Leonard during his decades-long career as a Navy contractor, years when he defrauded the government out of at least $35 million. In March, he appeared in a federal courtroom in San Diego, noticeably thinner and wearing a beige prisoner jumpsuit instead of the flashy wardrobe he was known for when he wined and dined Navy officers. It was a low-key hearing in one of the most extraordinary federal criminal conspiracies ever prosecuted.
There's never been such a wide-ranging corruption scandal within the U.S. military.
That's Rachel Van Landingham. She's a law professor at Southwestern Law School in Los Angeles. Before that, she was a lawyer in the Air Force.
In modern U.S. history, there's never been a case that was this encompassing, that cast this wide of a net, because we had such far-reaching corruption.
From the 1990s through his arrest in 2013, Francis admitted he bribed scores of Navy officers and civilians with lavish gifts, parties, and cash. In return, they helped steer ships to ports he controlled via his company, Glenn Defense Marine Asia. Francis overcharged the Navy with fake invoices signed off by Navy officials under his sway. He pleaded guilty in 2015 to pocketing at least $35 million in fraudulent charges. Dan Grazer was an officer in the Marine Corps. Now a senior defense policy fellow at the Project on Government Oversight, Grazer says he's concerned the lessons of the Fat Leonard scandal haven't been learned.
I see a broad systemic problem. The Department of Defense's over-reliance on contractors for basic support. So it means that there was a lot of people that knew this was going on, even if they weren't participating. They had to have known that it was going on, and they didn't report it.
Not everyone looked the other way. Dave Schaus was a Navy lieutenant who ran the Hong Kong Ship Support Office in the 2000s. Schaus noticed Francis billed the Navy for supplying more water than one ship could hold and confronted him. He says Francis became angry and got in his face.
He's big and intimidating. He figured out I wasn't going to, back down or move out of his space. Then he sat down and banged on the table a few times.
Navy records show Schaus reported Francis multiple times to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, or NCIS. He installed flow meters to measure how much liquid was actually being pumped onto and off Navy ships. But he says Francis and his allies in the Navy intervened.
Lieutenant Schaus, get back in your box. Lieutenant Schaus, it's not your job to investigate Fat Leonard. But I was young and idealistic. I didn't care. But he did have a lot of influence. And he was able to make my job difficult.
It took almost 10 years before federal investigators finally arrested Francis in 2013. More than 30 people, including an NCIS agent, eventually pleaded guilty to bribery and conspiracy-related charges. But the biggest case fell apart. 4 former 7th Fleet officers were found guilty of felony bribery in 2022, but their convictions were reduced to misdemeanors last year when federal prosecutors admitted withholding evidence from defense attorneys. Last month, prosecutors filed a brief indicating more convicted defendants could see reduced charges. Van Landingham says such conduct raises questions about the Justice Department.
The U.S. Attorney's Office here in Southern California should have been using the utmost care in prosecuting the right way.
The case took another bizarre turn in 2022 when Francis, under house arrest, cut his ankle monitor and fled the country. He was arrested in Venezuela and returned to the U.S. in a prisoner swap. Now in custody in San Diego, Francis waits to be sentenced. At his March hearing, he told the judge he's having trouble getting a new lawyer. She gave him 2 months to find one. So his sentencing date remains uncertain, 9 years after he pleaded guilty. I'm Andrew Dyer.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans. Virginia lawmakers approved a new statewide commission to determine how expanding public colleges has financially impacted black communities. The commission is in response to an investigation into the issue by the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO. VCIJ's Lewis Hansen reports.
The 19-member panel will be made up of legislators, educators, and Virginia citizens. The commission will determine whether some form of redress for property owners and their descendants is appropriate. Norfolk State history professor Cassandra Newby-Alexander said establishing a commission is a step in the right direction.
But also, is there going to be a law passed to stop this from ever happening again? Is there going to be a law passed to restore what was taken and to have money as part of that restoration, because money was involved in removing these people?
According to a series by the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO and ProPublica, Christopher Newport University, Old Dominion University, and the University of Virginia all acquired properties, sometimes by eminent domain or purchased at a discount, and disrupted stable black neighborhoods in order to expand their campus footprints. Lewis Hansen, the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO.
Preservation Virginia named 2 Suffolk communities among the state's most endangered historic places. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports that both were part of a thriving African-American waterman culture.
Mary Hill is a 7th-generation descendant of black freedmen who built the oystering village of Hobson along the Nansemond River. Over the years, she's seen historical buildings torn down and aging infrastructure neglected. Hill hopes this week's designation will draw attention and funding to the community.
That will give us a sense of protection while we continue to keep it moving and preserving and restoring and maintaining the character of our village.
Preservation Virginia also listed the nearby village of Oakland in Suffolk. It was founded in the 1800s and also served as a haven for black families making a living on the water. The nonprofit says Oakland and Hobson are threatened by flooding and modern development edging out historic homes. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services says residents statewide will soon have greater access to contraceptive services at pharmacies without a prescription. WFDD's Neil Charnoff reports.
That access includes counseling regarding contraception options, the prescribing of contraceptive pills and patches, and referrals to ongoing care. This new protocol of allowing pharmacists to provide care is intended to fill coverage gaps, especially in rural areas that are considered maternal health deserts. Officials say that more than half of all pregnancies in North Carolina are unintentional and can lead to poor outcomes for mothers and infants. I'm Neil Charnoff.
The Judeo-Christian Outreach Center is an organization at the Virginia Beach oceanfront that helps homeless adults. The group broke ground on a major expansion this week. WHRO's Sienna Morales reports.
The new building will provide 38 affordable housing units, a commercial kitchen and dining hall for food programs, and offices. Tim Stumpo says it's been 3 years since the center helped him find permanent housing. Before that, he was homeless for 35 years. The new building means a lot to him.
It means that more people will get housing help, and they can move forward in helping more people get out of the shelter and off the streets, like they did me.
While the campus is under construction, the center is operating food services out of area churches and an overnight shelter at the Housing Resource Center on Witch Duck Road. The new building is due to open in 2026. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
A string of rural land deals in Hampton Roads have fueled pushback against development in the past year. Hundreds more acres of farmland were on the auction block earlier this month in Suffolk. WHRO's Ryan Murphy takes us there.
And here you can pay $300,000. Thank you, $400,000, $500,000, out of the $400,000, $600,000, not now, and $500,000, not now.
In a ballroom at Suffolk's Hilton Garden Inn, shouted prices and parcel numbers flew through the air for an hour. When the dust settled, housing developer East West Communities was the new owner of more than 350 acres of Suffolk farmland. President Branch Lawson says the group expects to develop the $6 billion acquisition, but doesn't have any firm plans just yet.
We love this area. It's in the path of growth. We just think it's a great opportunity for our company.
The sale is emblematic of purchases that have some in the region raising alarm bells about developers buying up farmland to build housing. Jim Peel lives nearby.
When I first moved here, we had 1 car per stoplight. Now we got 10, so we don't want to see 50.
Just down the road, there's another big development on the way. 510 acres of farmland is set to become a sprawling warehouse complex there. Locals unsuccessfully sued to stop that project. Other deals for large swaths of farmland have prompted the same kind of pushback in Chesapeake and Virginia Beach over the last year. But Peel reckons it's a losing battle. I ask if he thinks anything can be done to stop the steady march of development. He silently rubs his thumb and fingers together.
Yeah, it's money, money, money. Everybody wants money.
Here. I have $5 billion, now $5 million, $6 million. 5 is bid, $6 million.
Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
The Virginia Zoo in Norfolk has a new turtle oasis. WHRO's Catherine Hafner stopped by to check it out.
The turtle exhibit takes over a site that's been empty for decades. Sydney Fordyce with the Virginia Zoo says it was once home to a popular sea lion habitat.
The structure of that in-ground pool is still there, and we've actually been able to build a boardwalk that kind of crosses over the center of it, so people can actually walk over the turtles as they may be swimming underneath them, crossing in between those pools.
The oasis is home to 26 turtles from 4 different North American freshwater species. Fordyce says many were confiscated through the illegal pet trade and can't be released back into the wild.
This gives them a safe space where they can live in a naturalistic environment.
She says the goal is to keep adding turtles over time. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The zoo will have a grand opening for the Turtle Oasis tomorrow, that's Saturday, May 18th, during its Party for the Planet. A Virginia Beach firm will unveil a new memorial in France ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day in World War II. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says it honors the forerunners of the Navy SEALs.
The memorial is being built near the town of Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer in France. It's designed to honor the underwater demolition technicians, scouts, and raiders who cleared the beaches ahead of D-Day on June 6, 1944. Says Erin Horton, a landscape architect with Clark Nexon.
They were some of the first ones in, and they went in the cover of darkness and basically paved the way for the troops to come in. And there were such a small amount of them, and they took heavy losses.
The firm was approached by Captain Rick Woolard, chair of the Navy UDT SEAL Museum. They worked with a French team over the last 18 months to design a monument in time for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The monument overlooks Omaha Beach, where the American troops came ashore. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Communities along the East Coast continue to face the threat of the rising sea. Climate scientist David Goodrich can see it. He's biking the Shoreline and Barrier Islands, an 1,800-mile trip from Florida to New Jersey. WHRO's Barry Graham caught up with Goodrich, who says this is a critical moment to look at this threatened region.
I have the sense that there are some of them that are not going to be here that much longer. I wanted to see what is happening on the coast, what exactly is happening to roads and houses and towns along the coast, and sort of to get up close and personal, which is what you can do on a bicycle.
Goodrich said there are efforts to thwart sea level rise, like houses being elevated. However, continuous building along the coast is still occurring, and he said at a huge cost, including on North Carolina's Outer Banks.
There remains an enormous amount of development on the coast. People are still building an awful lot of things pretty close to the water, from Florida through North Carolina, and also that there are people that are making resilience efforts, elevating buildings, but you're also seeing places where there are roads that they can't defend anymore, that are getting lost. Probably the best known around here is the Jug Handle on the Outer Banks, where they built, I think it was like almost $150 million to go around and go out into Pamlico Sound. On the island of Ocracoke, the north end of the island has gotten washed out repeatedly, and now they're basically just sandbags along the road that are keeping the ocean out. And you can see places down in the Keys where they basically had to abandon roads, where they've just physically can't keep the ocean out anymore.
Goodrich said close by in both Delaware and North Carolina are perhaps the most dramatic examples of what the encroaching ocean is doing to coastal communities, especially those that are being overdeveloped, and it appears no one is paying attention.
Verdanthe, North Carolina, on the Outer Banks, you have a clear place where overdevelopment is coming due. I mean, there's a fairly well-known video from I believe it was last winter, of a house on stilts getting washed out to sea. And if you go to that place now, you can see other houses on stilts with the water washing around the base of the houses. The one other place in Delaware Bay, there's a place where you can see a house that is kind of halfway out in the water, and you can see the deck is starting to go, and right next door, they're building another house. It's just, how does this happen? No.
Seawalls appear to be one solution coastal communities are trying, though, according to Goodrich, those efforts can actually only go so far, and their strategic placement can be detrimental to poor neighborhoods.
In Charleston, there is definite big seawalls that have gone up and are continuing to, but they only go so far. The place by the Coast Guard base, this is where the wall ends, and this is where the water comes in. And it's also a question of what the property is worth, because when the Corps of Engineers is building protective structures, they're saying we need to be cost effective on this. I think the short version is we need to protect high-value real estate, and that can leave the poorer neighborhoods quite vulnerable to flooding.
David Goodrich continued his ride north by biking through the Eastern Shore Barrier Islands. He plans to write a book about his trip and findings. For WHRO News, I'm Barry Graham.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Nick McNamara, Catherine Hafner, Ryan Murphy, Steve Walsh, Sienna Morales, and Barry Graham. VCIJ's Lou Hansen, WFDD's Neil Charnoff, and Andrew Dyer with the American Homefront Project. Also Connor Worley, who produced today's broadcast. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.